The beauty of free will is that us as humans get to make our daily decisions based off of two things: habit and emotion. However, it is a very well-known fact that if you do not control your emotions, you are going to create bad habits. Likewise, bad habits are going to create bad emotions. It's funny how it works. It's all a circle. If you lead yourself solely based off your emotions, you're either going to get very little to nothing done in your life, or you're going to make a lot of wrong choices. So, the only solution is controlling one of them. And the easiest way to do this is by controlling how you think and controlling your emotions. This video is how you're going to control your emotions before they become controlled by or for you. I do want to start this video with a little bit of disclaimer. There will be topics and subjects of self-harm, suicide, suicidal thoughts, eating disorders in this video. I beg you, if you're struggling or if this is something that may trigger you, click off this video, do not watch it, and please find something or someone that could help you out. If you're struggling, there are many resources that you can reach out to. I will link them down below. And please stay safe. I love you guys. We all feel happy at times. Those sporadic times of happiness, whether it's someone you like who texted back or you just got $1,000 from your paycheck. It's a very natural human thing to have this sort of reaction when something finally goes your way. Finally goes your way after weeks or days of struggling and seeing all gray in front of you, something finally goes your way. But I want you to understand, a lot of times we get our happiness from materialistic things other than ourselves, external things. And it is very important to keep in mind that if you are getting your happiness from someone, someone else that has free will, or something that can be taken away from you in a second, you're going to live a very unstable life. I want to start off this subject with a little bit of a story for you guys. About a month ago, I was in New York and I was coming home from a modeling campaign. Around this time, I also had gotten a job and I was getting paid pretty well for it, and I was proud of the money I was getting. I was finding a lot of worth in money around this time because I was so financially unstable just a couple of months before this. When I was receiving all this money, I was proud of it. That's where my happiness began to rise. I was struggling months before, but as the money came in, I began to realize or think that life was getting a little bit easier. So I'm walking on to this plane, right? I'm going through the tunnel and I reach my hand in my bag and I feel that my wallet is not there. My blue wallet with all my money, all my uncashed checks, all my cards is not in my bag. So I run out of that tunnel, hoping, praying that I'm going to find my wallet somewhere outside in the waiting place of the flight. The moment I stepped off that tunnel, the flight attendant looked at me. She said, "What are you doing?" So I look at her and I say, "My wallet is not there. I need to find my wallet." She says, "Yeah, but you can't get back on that flight. You know that, right?" So me and her are having a stare down. I just lost my wallet. I've missed my flight despite only being off it for a second. And now I'm stuck in the middle of New York. No money, no flight, no way back. Looking back at it, the funniest thing about that whole ordeal was that I was not afraid about the fact that I was stuck in the middle of New York without a flight or a way back. I was depressed about the amount of money that I had lost. All that money I spent 2 months working for, gone in an instant when you least expected it. And the worst is that I found all my happiness in that. I didn't realize until I returned home safely that I wasn't even happy that I was safe. I was still upset about this darn wallet, about this money, because I found all my worth in it. I got my happiness from materialistic things that I can buy with money. I got my happiness from the security that money bought me, funny enough. The reason why I brought that up is because I wanted you guys to see and realize how quick something that brings happiness from not within yourself can be taken from you. at God's will. And truly, I think all of that happening, me losing all that money, was a lesson sent from God. Because at that time, I was finding all of my worth and putting all my energy into this green thing right here. Okay? And because of that, I was disregarding so many other things. Like, I felt happy from this, but the moment it got taken from me, I wasn't happy anymore. So it wasn't true happiness. I wasn't truly happy. At the time I was getting all of this, I wasn't really happy. I was just satisfied. I was controlled by this thing. If you take another example, right, I think this is a very common thing, but when you put all your worth into another person, someone else with their own will, keep that in mind. You are not truly happy within yourself. If you feel the need to be complete with other external things, understand you're not happy within yourself. You're missing something. Obviously, when speaking about something so important in this world like finance, that's a big important thing. You cannot live without finance. But also, there are people who quite literally live without finance. And they're the happiest people on earth. Whenever I do struggle a lot with money. I find a lot of worth in money. I like money. But when I feel as if it's turning into greed, I think about how my father used to tell me he was completely fine in his younger days playing soccer barefoot. Football, for any European watchers out there. I no longer find worth in this thing. It's great to have it. I like shiny, nice things. But I don't find worth. I don't hold on to it the same way I did before I lost all of that. Because when you lose something, you realize that it can happen again. So as a result, I became very selfless with this thing. Now, I do not hold any value to this. It's nice. It's a byproduct of my hard work. But I don't hold any value to it. Because I now understand how easily it can be taken away from you. And I know if this goes, that I won't feel as hurt as I did before when I lost all that money. It's also an abundance mindset. Because of that whole situation, I began to have an abundance mindset. I had to tell myself and repeat to myself over and over and over again that this will come back one way or another. Either I have to work for it or be smarter. That's just one example. Again, you need to have that mentality for everything else around you. Be happy about the people and the places and the things that give you that happiness. But don't be attached to it. That's the difference. Don't find your happiness in this one thing. It's not exactly something that you should control or should hide, but you should be very wary of how you get your happiness. If you get your happiness by doing drugs, you're going to hurt yourself in the long run. If you get your happiness by going to the gym, you're going to be healthy. Another thing, as you should not find your happiness in external things, you should also not rely on your happiness to make decisions. That's how they get the gamblers, okay? You win this big prize and now you're excited, you're feeling confident, because that's what happiness tricks you into being, confident. It tricks you into this momentary feeling of confidence, which can cause you to make very detrimental mistakes. In gambling terms, losing all your money. Sometimes happiness can also lead to delusion, okay? Delusion of the future. It kind of warps your brain into thinking that this is going to last forever. Understand it doesn't, okay? Happiness, all emotions, good or bad, they don't last forever. Therefore, you should not make any decisions based on any emotion, including and especially happiness. When you're happy, stay grounded. That is my suggestion to you. If somebody makes you happy or something makes you happy, stay very grounded. Do not become attached to it. You can allow it to bring you gratitude and faith, but do not attach yourself to it. Because again, the moment it leaves, you'll find yourself with nothing but despair and emptiness. All this goes to say, don't be miserable. You don't have to be miserable. But the only thing you need to pay attention to is when you're like this, at the top of this peak, don't make any detrimental decisions. Don't make any decisions that you may regret. I'd like you to remember not to become attached to any external thing bringing you happiness. Because again, if it's not from you, it has its own will. All right? Again, not literally, this doesn't have its own will, but other people do. If they decide that they want to do a little snatchy snatch, it's not in my hands anymore. Nothing that is not from here is in your hands. So don't rely on anything that is not from here. Anger. Anger is the emotion that causes you to lash out. And many times, make a lot of dumb decisions. Decisions that could harm others or yourself. I used to be an extremely angry person. Okay, I went through many phases of my life. One of them was being mad all the time. Mad that things didn't go my way. Mad about this person. Mad about whatever. In this sense, I want you to think that you are in a heat of an argument, right? Everyone has a different way of lashing out on their emotions. Some people yell, some people hit. Some people say things that you can never take back. Understand that when you are mad, you are not thinking of what the possibilities of your reactions could be. First, understand why that you lash out this way. Why do you hit walls? Why do you scream? Why do you say mean things? It all links back to our childhood. Everything that we do daily leads back to our childhood. Sometimes when you do not feel heard as a kid, you resort to screaming, you resort to yelling, anything for attention. And that, if it's not fixed or dealt with early on, it leads into your present day life, which means whenever you get in an argument, that habit comes back. It is kind of a tactic to appear bigger when you feel so small, when you feel like no one in the room is listening to you. When you get angry, it's like a cry for listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying, which is completely right in many ways. But when you act on that, heat of the moment, you will say and do things you can never take back. When you lash out, like happiness, with anger, you're not thinking in the future. You're not realizing the weight that your actions in the moment can carry in the future. So when you're in an argument and you say something to your friend that you can never take back, that sets the tone for the rest of your relationship. I feel like there's a very fine line between listen to me and just mad straight up disrespect. And you have to be very careful not to cross that line. If you want to raise your voice a little bit, if you want to get your point across, make sure you keep it respectful. Metaphor I like to use a lot when my mom used to yell at me in my earlier days was that if you yell at a dog, it's not going to understand what you're saying. When you yell at someone in general, they're not understanding what you're saying. We're kind of like dogs in that sense. We're kind of like, oh, this person's mad at me. Let me get mad back. When two people are mad at each other, it gets nowhere. A lot of the times when we get mad, it has something to do with our ego. Something budged our ego a bit, and we can't believe it happened. Anger is usually a response to embarrassment, humiliation, disbelief. Those are the three things that are usually followed by anger. When you're angry, you fail to see anyone's perspective but yours. You kind of just yell to get your point across. You scream or you act out in order to make yourself feel seen. Again, which is tied to something that you lacked in your childhood, feeling seen. You make very detrimental decisions at this state. Believe me on this. The best way to dealing with any sort of situation that makes you angry, you hear that someone said something about you, or someone said something about you in front of your face, you need to neutralize yourself first. You cannot act on anything as long as you're not in a neutral state. When I was 15, I struggled very badly with an eating disorder. This eating disorder took over my life. I could barely go to school. It ruined my family. And all I could think about was losing weight or my next meal. It was a very dark time in my life, and because of that, I also fell into a depression as well. Depression and eating disorders do not mix well. If you don't see a point of living, you don't eat, and that was my entire mindset at the time. It was very difficult to lift me out of that state because of that, because of these two things combined. And, it reached a point where everything that was said to me felt like an attack. I was so malnourished to the point that anything that you said to me felt like a personal attack, and I was ready to lash out. I was always angry at this time, partially because I was malnourished, but mostly because everything that was said to me felt like a stab to my ego. Again, madness and ego come one in one. So, where I'm going with this point is that eventually it reached a point where I attempted to take my own life due to an argument that I had with an uncle and my mother. And that decision was based purely off of anger. I went upstairs, downed as many pills of morphine I had left over from my knee surgery, and called it a day. Had my sister not found me laying on my bed, I would not be here sharing this story right now. The reason why I brought this story up was because I wanted to show you guys just how dangerous acting off of not just emotions, but madness can be. You truly don't think ahead. I quite literally would be buried somewhere right now. And that's how serious it is. Anger is a very serious emotion. It's put people in jail. It's put people in the ground. It's made people insane. And if you don't control it, it will control you until you have to be controlled by someone else. Where I'm going with the controlled by someone else, a lot of the people, when I went to the hospital to have my life saved, basically, I got admitted into a psych ward. A lot of the people there were very angry people. There was this one guy I'll never forget. He never spoke any English, and at the time I didn't know that much French, but he was always mad. You could tell by the tone of his voice. He was struggling with some drug issues, God bless him, but he always lashed out. He didn't have any sense of humanity when he did. He would hit others, threaten to hit others, threaten to shoot others, to the point where he quite literally had to be held down, sedated, and brought to what you call a white room. I'll leave a picture right here, but in case you don't know, there it is. And when you're subjected, when you're actually subjected to how dangerous this emotion could be, you want nothing to do with it. Now, a lot of the times I freeze up due to anger. And I'm sure a lot of others do. People who grew up in environments where that's all they've known. Anger stuns people. And I think that's why so many people try to use it to their advantage. Anger gives that little fake illusion that you're in control. You feel some sort of control when you smash the vase. You feel some sort of control when the person you're yelling at cowers beneath you. But understand that it's not an advantage. You're in as little a control as the person you're getting angry at. Because again, when you take that swing, when you say that word, when you make that remark, that is something that will never leave the other's brain. No matter how many times you apologize. I've made mistakes. I've said things to people. I've made choices that I can never take back. That has ruined friendships for me. Ruined trust for me. Because I acted out of anger and desperation. And that's why I think it is so important to neutralize yourself. Always neutralize yourself. No matter what you're feeling in the moment, even if you're just told the worst news of your life, you neutralize yourself and you think about how you're going to go about it. You do not act on emotion. Never. Because it could harm you. It could harm someone else. And the feeling that you put in the air afterwards will never leave. It will never leave. So I beg you, I urge you, whenever you feel that instinct to raise your voice, whenever you feel that instinct to take that swing to you or someone else, you think. Even if it's just 5 seconds, give yourself 5 seconds to truly think, is this worth it? Is what I'm about to do worth it? And what are the consequences of it? Again, when it is something that you used to cope in your childhood, it is very hard to get under control. But the first step to controlling is recognizing it, recognizing the pattern, and putting an end to it. We all feel it at times, whether it's someone that you lost in your life or something that didn't go out as planned. You become sad over it because you saw something that never happened. And what you need to understand about sadness is that you're living in the past. When you are sad, you're reminiscing in the times that were good. Understand that turns into depression. Again, I struggle with depression. And with depression, it becomes a point. Depression is basically finding comfort in sadness. I can say that was the case for me. Depression is where sadness becomes to a point where it's so hard to leave because you don't want to see anything ahead. You would rather live in the past. My depression came from wanting to go back to America so bad. Again, around this time, I was 15. So a little bit about myself. During high school, I spent all my high school years out of America. I changed schools every year. I was in a different country every year. And because of that, there were so many memories that came with that. Sometimes I really liked the school. I really liked the people there. But when I left, that would leave me reminiscing in the old times. So as a byproduct, I became very depressed because of that. Specifically between the ages 14 to 16, I was morbidly depressed because I was living in the past. So knowing that the only way to deal with sadness is by being in the present. Now that we are talking about sadness, let's get on to the subject of crying when things get difficult. Again, looking back at our childhoods, crying is a response to wanting to feel heard and wanting to be consoled. When we cry, we want whoever is arguing with us to soften up. We want to feel a warm hand on our shoulder when we're crying into the pillow of our bed. That is what crying is, And as someone who struggles a lot, getting better at it, but struggles a lot with crying when things get difficult, you have to understand it becomes a subconscious attempt to want to be babied, As much as I hate to admit it, I am a little bit of a baby. Again, I cry a lot. Sometimes all we want to hear is, I'm sorry, I forgive you, you're right, you're always right, I'll buy you a Rolls Royce. But again, control your emotions, control your sadness, and you will be able to think and see clearly. When you are sad, you will not see all the other options there are for you in life. If you are sad about losing someone, it's a very hard thing to go through. But you don't see, as a byproduct of that, by refusing to move on, you don't see all the other great things that there are in life. You have to understand, when it comes to losing someone, yes, you lose someone you love. But I promise you, that person you loved so dearly would not want to see you crying like that for so long. If you're crying over a friendship, if you're crying over a relationship, again, the tears cause you to be blind to all the other great people that there are on this earth. And here's the thing, you have to realize that, and I had to learn this the hard way too, as long as you decide to sleep in your pile of trash and misery, you will live a life of such. It does not get better until you allow it to. And it literally took me breaking my family, breaking myself apart to realize that no one can save you but yourself. And in sadness, I know that you want to be saved, but you can only save yourself. You can get all the help you want, In my sense, I had all these therapists, all these doctors. I did not want to get better until I made that decision to. And I urge you to do the same. Because there's so much more to life out there than just being comfortable in your own sadness. It gets scary. to leave it. As dumb as it sounds, I know it gets scary to leave your own sadness because you're comfortable with that. It's almost like you don't want to be taken out of it. You'd rather, live this life. It gets to a point where you get comfortable with it. As much as you hate to admit it, that's the truth. But please understand that's not comfort. That's just your emotions controlling you. Please don't allow it to do it any longer. When you reach that point, because I know I did, where you're able to be conscious of what you're doing to yourself and what you're allowing your sadness to do to you, you have to snap out of it. I had to do that too. I had a friend who had to do that too. He himself said it's hard when it's comfortable. It is hard. It's going to be hard because it's a habit now. Again, your emotions create habit, especially when you act off of them again and again and again. That's why I say, and a lot of people do disagree, but depression gets to a point where it becomes habit, simply because you're used to waking up and not wanting to wake up. When your brain gets used to you waking up and not wanting to wake up, that's what it's going to wake up to every day. So whenever, you do start that journey, and I urge you to get better or to stop feeling sad all the time, you have to fight that constantly. I had to too. You had to fight that constant urge to be sad, as dumb as it sounds. Things are going great and all of a sudden you're reminded of something that you missed so much. And all that just makes you want to curl up into a ball and cry. I get that. But you have to fight the urge every single time. Don't let it control you. Again, sadness becomes habit. Anger becomes habit. All of these emotions become habit as long as you allow it to control you. And to break a habit, it's hard. But at the end of the day, it is a choice. Every time you make that choice, I'm going to speak in terms of my eating disorder, but every time I made that choice to skip a meal, every time I made that choice to mentally count my calories, every time I made that choice to step on that scale, even though I knew it wasn't good for me, it was my choice. Yes, it was habit. Yes, I was sick, but at the end of the day, it was my choice. And the only time I broke free of that was by realizing that I had full control over my brain. As much as the doctors, and then this is another reason why I disliked therapists or I disliked doctors around that time. I always kind of had this feeling that it never helped me because it was a constant reminder. Try to separate the things that make you want to relapse into that state. Relapse into sadness, relapse into curling up into a ball and not wanting to get out of your bed. Avoid the things that make you want to do that. Whether it's watching sad movies, listening to sad music, there are very subtle things in your life that you can change, which will change your life. And again, when you are around things that serve as a constant reminder, you will be sad. And if you have that choice, you need to stop, because all these small things are literally what's holding you back. And again, an example I like to use is how I didn't really have a choice, but I had to see doctors all the time when I was anorexic. It served as a constant reminder to my sickness, I feel like with eating disorders specifically, and those who have went through it, I feel like they can relate a little bit. It becomes hard to come out of something you find an identity in. And that was, again, it's the same thing with sadness or depression. When you find an identity in something, then it becomes hard to break out of it, especially when everything that's around you serves as a constant reminder to what you are. You feel so dehumanized to the point that you don't feel anything but that mental illness. You don't feel like you are anything without that mental illness. You are. Let me be the first and the last to tell you that. You're much more than whatever the doctors, people around you, or your thoughts are telling you. And please don't allow this or whatever happened to take control of your emotions and to take control of your life. It's not worth it. There's so much greater things out there. And please, again, quick reminder, if you need support, in the description, it's right there. Reach out to me. I'll do my best to respond. But this is genuine heart to heart because I know how hard it is Don't let your sadness control you. Now, this part goes for anyone really, but women specifically. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that if you do not control your emotions, people will control it for you. In terms of sadness, as a woman, be very careful about who you vent to. I had to learn this the hard way again. And an example I'd like to bring up before I get into my point and break it down for you guys is one time when I was in Dubai, my first ever party I went to, I lost 500 USD. And that 500 USD was given to both me and my sister to be able to basically live for the next couple of months. You know, we were in a hotel and my parents were unable to come to the country at the moment. So me and my sister basically had these $500 to live off of. We could go shopping, we can go whatever. I lost all of that at the party. I got my purse stolen, and when it was returned, none of that was in there. So obviously I began to cry. You know, I began crying. That was my first response, panicking. And I remember I was sat down and I was consoled. You know, and at first I thought, oh, this is sweet. All these gentlemen around me are consoling me. There was also a lady next to me as well, or a girl next to me as well. So they were all consoling me. And then, you know, I began to notice how pressuring the men were becoming. And I thought it was just me at that moment. But the girl next to me, she says, don't listen to them. They're just talking to you because they want something from you. At first, I was confused about it. I was younger at the time, so it didn't really resonate in my head at that moment. But as I grew older, I began to realize a trend. You know, I feel like a lot of things that girls can relate to, you go and vent to your best friend that is a boy about something that happened between you and your boyfriend. And maybe you guys broke up or something like that. Maybe you've seen the videos on TikTok making fun of this trope that it's kind of like a shark in the water, you know? If you don't know what I mean, I'm going to put up a clip right here. Understand that as a woman, a lot of the times when you are consoled by the opposite gender, especially if you are a more attractive woman, it is not for the reason you think. You know, if they see that you are vulnerable in that moment, they are seeing you as easily manipulated and persuade. Another example, you know, a couple months ago, as I mentioned, I was struggling a lot financially, I was struggling socially, I was struggling every which way, family-wise as well. And it came to a point where I was crying in public because all of these thoughts in my head, couldn't think straight, started crying, couldn't control myself. And I was approached by these two men, one of whom were very, very kind, genuinely down to earth. And the other, I'm going to get to later. They brought me into their work, sat me down, told me to tell them everything that was wrong, and I did, because sometimes it is easier talking to a stranger. One of the men, the one I mentioned earlier, the kind one, gave me genuine advice, showed genuine care, and offered anything he could, even if it was just words of encouragement, to get me back up on my feet, to give me a little bit of motivation. So, a client ended up coming up to the front desk, and the man who was consoling me had to go and help him out. And the other man, who was watching and listening the entire time, and mind you, this guy was a security guard. The moment this guy leaves, he turns to me and goes, "You're really pretty. I like your body. I think we should connect. What's your Instagram?" This guy is the exact epitome of what I'm trying to warn you about. Now, it's not to say that the man who asked me was going to kill me or was a serial killer or anything dangerous. But that just shows that people really don't have decency. People don't have boundaries. People don't know right and wrong. And I feel like anyone in the right mind, if they would see a crying girl, would actually, because that's what I would do, would try to do anything to help without anything in return. But you have to understand, as you know, especially if you're a more attractive female, that's never usually the case. If people do want to help you out as a girl when you're distressed, it is out of expectancy. Men do not take tears the same way that us girls take tears. When our friend is crying, we think, oh my gosh, she's distressed. We have to save her. We have to help her. What can we do to help? But when a man sees tears, he thinks one of two things. A, we're being dramatic. Or B, which is for most cases, they're very easy to manipulate. They're going to be very easy to control. Please, as a woman, I beg you, do your best not to cry in front of men. As much and as traditional and as annoying as it sounds, it's for your safety. Do everything you can to not let your tears be seen by men. Okay? A woman that shows that she is very easily coerced by her emotions will be subjected to gaslighting and manipulation. Again, I'm speaking from experience, 2 experiences and many more I can name. Try your best not to be emotional in front of people who you aren't close or comfortable with. Now, the last one that I'm going to go over today is anxiety or fear. A lot of times when you're a very fearful person or you act off of fear, you are afraid of the outcome. You're thinking too much into the future. And when you do this, you miss out on so many opportunities. Likewise with sadness, you miss out on so many opportunities based off of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure. If you're someone who struggles a lot with fear, chances are you faced a lot of backlash for any mistakes that you did in your childhood. Fear a lot of times does come from, medical anxiety. I've never been diagnosed with anxiety, but, people who have been, please share your experience in the comments. I feel like if you're a very anxious person, you may struggle with making the wrong move and feeling as if everything could crumble down as a result of it. You will struggle with overthinking a lot. I myself did struggle with overthinking, and the only way you can fix that is by understanding that overthinking in any tense, past tense, present tense, or future tense, is not going to solve the issue. It is a coping mechanism too. A lot of these things tied with emotions or tied to what you do out of response to an emotion you have are coping mechanisms. When you overthink, it tricks your brain into thinking that you are controlling the problem, but you are not. Okay? You're just magnifying it. When you try to think of a solution, or you try to think of a reason, or you try to understand something that's happened to you or something that's happened to someone, you're driving yourself insane. You are literally driving yourself insane. Now, with overthinking, you have to understand the reason why you do it. I struggled with overthinking, and I still do. The thing about overthinking is that you're breaking down the problem, you're thinking of all the solutions, you're thinking of all the perspectives and all the reasonings, and you believe that you are actively solving it, or your brain likes to trick you into thinking that you are, but in reality, you're just magnifying it. Okay, you're not doing anything to solve it. You're just making the problem worse in your head than it actually is. For example, if someone said something, now you're going to go home and think of why they said it, what they meant by it, how it made you feel. You are simply just making yourself feel worse by doing that. You're creating anxiety. If you live in the future or you're thinking about all these things that could happen as a result of your mistakes or whatever now, of course you're going to be anxious. You're going to be anxious as a result of that. You have to realize that when you're anxious, nothing you overthink from the past is going to help, and nothing you overthink from the future is going to do anything to solve the problem. You have to be simply in the present. If you catch yourself getting into that cycle where you overthink and you become fearful of your next move or something that you did before, you have to cut it off right then and there. Me personally, when I decided to stop this habit of overthinking, it all started with pattern recognition, which is, I know, another big thing of why we overthink. We notice patterns, but turn that pattern recognition into yourself, okay? Focus on your own patterns. Don't focus on other people's, because you can't control them. If you're beginning to notice that you're falling in that cycle where you're overthinking something in the future, or you're overthinking something that was said, or you're overthinking something that you said, or you're overthinking something that you've done, you have to cut yourself off right then and there. Again, when it is a habit, it is very hard to break, but it is your habit. And pattern recognition, again, like I mentioned, is going to be your best friend in this. you notice a pattern. You sit down, you start to overthink, or you're busy and your mind starts to wander into something that you did, stop it. Okay? As dumb as it sounds, that's the only way to do it. You got to stop it. That's how I stopped it myself. Either by busying yourself with another thing, watching a movie. I know it's difficult to calm yourself when there's so many voices in your head, but you got to do whatever it takes. Everyone copes with it differently. I thankfully have gotten to a point, it took time, but I've gotten to a point where if I notice it, I can stop it right then and there and just move on. But sometimes people have to go for a walk. Sometimes people have to clean their room. Taking a shower also helps. Again, you cannot stop something without recognizing that it's happening. And you have to accept that it is a coping mechanism first. And you have to accept that you're using it to avoid the actual issue. For example, if someone said something mean to you, you're going to go home and overthink about it rather than just confronting them about it. I promise anxiety and fear comes so much more controllable if you are more vocal about your beliefs. And when someone did you wrong, you're more vocal about it. I know that when I was overthinking so much, it was a cause of me not setting boundaries and me not feeling comfortable enough in my own skin to tell someone what they did was not right. A lot of fear and anxiety comes from self-deprecation. When you don't really value yourself, when you aren't confident in your own skin or you're not confident in general, a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear comes from keeping all the things that we feel within ourselves. Not having the confidence to say, I don't think this was right. I don't think what we did is right. I don't think what I did is right, or apologizing for it. When you keep that all to yourself and you don't have the confidence to bring it up, that's where all the overthinking comes. And you use it to kind of converse with yourself because you don't really have the confidence to do it with the other person. So you kind of reason it within yourself. Again, it's useless. You can't control what someone else is thinking. You don't know what someone else is thinking. You don't know if they're thinking about you at all. So why bother? Why bother with it, truly? I'm harsh on stuff like this because I know that's how I got over it, by being hard with myself, by having to cut myself off the moment that I began to realize I was going down that spiral again. No, you got to cut yourself off right then and there. It's going to take time. It took me time to get to the state where I am now. I still have times where I look back and I overthink. But in reality, that's the only way to stop it, by stopping it. I remember uploading a video and it didn't resonate with many people because they're like, oh, you don't know what it's like. I'm an overthinker. It's not that easy. It's not, but it's that simple. The difference between easy and simple is that simple is how straightforward the action must be. Stopping your overthinking. By stopping your overthinking. That's how simple it is. It's not easy. No, it's not. It's not easy to do because it's a habit. And again, it's very hard to break habits, but your habits are your own. Stop using emotions to justify your actions. Stop using emotions to make decisions. Stop giving other people the chance to be able to use your emotions against you. Nothing said in this video is easy to do, but it is your choice to make. Choice becomes habit. I urge you, please make that choice to break that habit, whatever it is. Whether it is making bad decisions based on a whim because you were happy, whether it is saying things you cannot take back just because you're angry, or whether it is crying because you don't know how else to express how you feel. Do not allow your emotions to control you. Because the sooner you take control of your emotions, the sooner you take control of your life.